I started a book over 6 months ago when I had a free trial of Kindle Unlimited. That subscription ended about at the end of the first chapter of the book, and I've been left hanging ever since. But last week I finally finished the book, and today we are going to be talking all about it. But before we dive into the book, first, I apologize for the background noise. I do not have a quiet spot in my house to record this, so I'm trying outside, and of course, all the neighbors started mowing their lawn. It's just what happens, right? Anyway, I'm Chantel. I am the face behind the channel Fairly Bookish. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok primarily under this handle. I talked about fairy tales, fantasy, myth, a little historical fiction, and all things bookish. So if you are into those things, hit the like and subscribe and follow along. All right, let's get into the book. I'm going to put the cover somewhere on the screen, and it is the book Brine and Bone by Kate Stradling. Earlier in the year, or late last year, I read a Thrushbeard retelling by Kate Stradling, and it is one of my top 5 books, probably in a long time. There were multiple reasons why that book really got me, but one of them was she takes the essence of that original story of Thrushbeard, which, by the way, isn't an example of a great parent, and she stays more true to that than most people do, while still redeeming the story in such an incredible way. If you haven't read that one, it is called The Beggar Prince, and it is in the Once Upon a Prince multi-author collab. You should read all of those books because they are all so good. But this particular story is from another series of hers, and it is called Brine and Bone, and it is a Little Mermaid retelling. If you are familiar with the actual story that the Little Mermaid is based on, you know it's not a great story. It is pretty horrific, in fact, and there are elements of it that are just so heartbreaking. And most of the time, I'm kind of glad most people kind of veer away from how that story ended and give it a new ending that's a little bit more similar to the Disney version of the story. But one of the things I really have come to love about Kate Stradling is she doesn't typically do that. She finds a way to follow the story, not maybe exactly, but much more closely than some people do, and still redeem the story. So you're not left with this horrible feeling as you read how the original stories, which are often very gruesome, played out. And in this book, Brine and Bone, the Little Mermaid and the prince do become connected through an event. His ship is lost at sea, he is thrown overboard, and everybody thinks that he has died. But a magical being that a lot of people don't really know about ends up saving him. But it is actually his childhood friend, a magic using girl who is at a school of training for magical people and has been sent away from court at a young age. So she hasn't seen him in, I believe, 6 to 10 years. I can't remember the timeline exactly. But she actually ends up finding him washed up on shore near where she is walking because she is grieving him heavily because she has always cared for him deeply. Almost like childhood love that you know is never going to get fulfilled. This sort of sets off a plot line that is kind of crazy. She ends up being called to the palace by his parents as a apprentice to their healer because she has a type of ability to figure out what's hurting somebody. She isn't a healing mage, but she can tell somebody what's wrong with their body and they can then treat it appropriately. They seem to have forgotten who she is, his parents, and she's actually the heir to a duchy that is nearby, so almost like a mini kingdom. So she is a princess in her own right, but they forget this and they try to apprentice her, which is basically like a servant's position. The prince is having none of this because he remembers who she is and he has loved her since they were children, but she doesn't know this, so she just thinks he's being I don't know, insufferable and just using her to get attention or something. So she is pretty heartbroken because she cares for him so much and she thinks that he doesn't care for her or can't care for her in return. And then someone shows up on the beach who is the most beautiful little thing, the most pretty little thing, as the book says, and nobody can say anything else about her except for how pretty little thing she is. And she is absolutely attached to the prince's side, and it is only through her magic that his childhood friend can kind of get a glimpse beyond the glamour and see that this is actually one of the sea fae, which some people call a mermaid or a selkie or some sort of a siren or something like that. And she has glamored herself in order to try to win the prince who she had put up on the shore after she pulled him under the water. I don't want to give away a lot of the details because you really need to read the book to get the storyline and to get the full effect of how this story plays out. But what I loved about it was, even though the true story of the Little Mermaid is pretty horrific, at the end of this story, Kate Stradling redeems the sacrifice that each of these people have made. She gives you the happily ever after with the people who are supposed to be together without downplaying or diminishing the choice that sea fae had to make. At the end of the book, I felt really emotional because I wanted so badly for these two people to end up happy and together, but you couldn't help but feel a lot of empathy for the girl who was that sea fae, that siren, and feel the impossibility of the whole situation where there was not a choice for her that wouldn't end in sorrow for somebody, and probably for herself as well. So if you have not read Brine and Bone by Kate Stradling, and you want to read a Little Mermaid story that is much more closely aligned to the original tale, give it a try. I would highly recommend any of her books, but if you have a kind of bone to pick with other retelling authors and you want to read some stories that stick closer to the storyline, she is probably going to be one of your new favorite authors. And if you have read her books and want to chat about them, message me, because there's a lot of things that are kind of spoilers, which I try to avoid on these videos, which I would love to talk to somebody about. So shoot me a comment, shoot me a message, and let's chat. Until next time, happy reading, and let me know what your current read is in the comments below.